My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, I was reading an article in the Journal of Financial Planning about categorizing financial wellness. And in this article, the researchers consider financial health, which are those objective metrics that we've been taught to look at, like various ratios and savings rates, things like that. It also considers financial well-being, which is subjective and is based on how people feel about their finances. So they identify the categories as content, meaning a person has high financial health and high financial well-being. Then there's overconfident, meaning a person has low financial health and high financial well-being. There's pessimistic, meaning a person has high financial health and low financial well-being, and dangerous, meaning a person has low financial health and low financial well-being. So when you hear this, what are your initial thoughts?
I struggle a lot with studies and academic reviews of financial planning or, all sorts of other things. These researchers are trying to do the best they can, but in many cases, these are not practical results that the average person that we help would ever really care about. I mean, everybody is different. When they talk about subjective findings, we all have different feelings about money. We've all had different life experiences with money. And so, like, if somebody comes in and I started to ask them questions about financial well being, you would get so many different answers. And I would tend to look at it and I would say, okay, like even my more objective review of their situation, like somebody outside of their situation, looking at them, without the emotional attachment to whatever they're dealing with, I might look at that and come to a completely different conclusion from where they are. So when we get into feelings, for example, it is absolutely one of the challenges with financial planning is because many of us will have really strong feelings about whatever financial situation that we're in. In many cases, if we have a poor financial situation, we want to rationalize, well, isn't this what everybody does? I have credit card debt. Doesn't everybody have credit card debt? I hear that all the time. It's like, well, no, they don't. But that's a way for me to feel better about these things. And a lot of that isn't captured in academic research. It's like what we do is so different from these types of questions that it's hard to translate back and forth. Everything is so personal in what we do. They don't fit in a nice, neat box where you mentioned those four different boxes. Some might, but many of them would cross over in different ways. And that's the frustration I have with a lot of these studies.
I completely agree with that. When I was reading the article, I was like, there are some people that do not fit into one of these boxes. So I definitely agree with you. Now, you were saying we do things differently. When we talk about quality of life planning, how is that different from traditional financial planning that just focuses on numbers and net worth?
It's a great question, and sometimes it's hard to differentiate because obviously we do care about the numbers. And at the same time, though, quality of life is inherently personal. It's all about your values and priorities and motivations, and your values are not numbers. Your values are the way that you feel strongly about things that are important to you. So if somebody comes in and they said, hey, having a really nice home is really important to me, we're going to consider that a quality of life goal. And we're going to walk through the numbers and say, is this realistic? Or what kind of sacrifices you might have to make in order to accomplish that quality of life goal. I have a nicer home, it's more expensive. Maybe I have to sacrifice on my vehicles or eating out or traveling or whatever it is. Those things are not right or wrong. So, quality of life planning in most cases for us is really focused on people taking the actions, like tangible actions, in order to help improve their quality of life. So much of the Journal of Financial Planning, and that really is, I mean, the Journal of Financial Planning, for those that don't know, is really more of an academic type of journal. And you'll have very long articles, they'll have, complicated formulas and things like that that are geared more towards financial advisors. But a lot of times I read that and I go, well, this is great. It might advance the knowledge of the profession as a whole, but it's really for financial advisors. And translating that to an individual, we have to work from more of a common sense, practical perspective and say, well, what does this mean to you? Should you do this or should you do this? And action oriented advice, in my opinion, is the most powerful way to do financial planning.
I agree. Now, sometimes I just want to say you were talking about putting things in a practical perspective. There are times that we do see those people that come in who are overconfident. They think that, everything's great with their finances, and then we see, they may have a litany of debt obligations and things like that. How do we help them navigate those gaps and the risks that they're overlooking?
Yeah, sometimes people just want to put their head in the sand and
Hmm.
kind of ignore their situation. And, I refer to this a lot of times in how I deal with it as cognitive empathy. We are aware of what these people are thinking, what they're feeling. We are not feeling their feelings. That would be normal empathy, but we can kind of put ourselves into their shoes, but without that emotional attachment. So now we can logically think through, okay, this person's not being necessarily realistic about their situation. And our job is to try very hard in order to bring them around to a different perspective.
Hmm.
Now, we understand some of those people are not going to, they're going to be highly resistant to that. So we might have to try different ways of doing that. I will tell you personally, again, my primary partner is Ellen, and Ellen is in almost all of my meetings. And so you are talking about we always have this two-person team working with this individual. And sometimes the way I might approach it, Ellen can recognize that person is not taking that in. Like they are just not going to process that. So, for example, if we're helping a lot of our clients are women, if we're helping a woman who's maybe struggled with relationships with men, maybe they don't trust me. And
Hmm.
now Ellen might jump in, has a completely different type of perspective and approach coming from a female perspective. And that person, she might say almost exactly the same thing. And all of a sudden you can see that that resonates with that individual that we're helping. So a lot of times our team approach really helps as well with this quality of life financial planning.
Yeah, that's awesome to be able to have two different perspectives, even if you're saying the same thing, but having those two different people be able to share and help the client. Interestingly enough, when the study looked into demographics of those in the various quadrants, they found a strong correlation between one's health and their financial wellness. Does that surprise you at all?
Not at all. Financial planning and personal health are very much intertwined. If somebody's extremely responsible with their finances, if they consistently live within their means, for example, in many cases, these are also people who prioritize their health. So they might make a habit of consistently walking or consistently eating relatively well. People who kind of take that approach, like you talked about that danger quadrant where they don't have particularly good well-being and they don't feel very good about themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of times what we'll see is their health has suffered as well. So
Mm.
finances, in many cases, either contribute to the stress and the cortisol and all the issues that you might be dealing with, or they help alleviate some of those types of things that we experience in regular life. And that's very much the same with diet, exercise, and a lot of the things associated with having good personal health.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that saying, if you do how you do one thing is how you'll do everything. So that makes sense. And as a final takeaway, if someone is watching this and they feel like they should feel better about their finances but don't, what would you want them to know?
Sometimes we see people come in and, I could almost like look at them and just the way they talk and present themselves, like, I know they're probably in pretty good shape. And they'll tell me right from the start, like, we're behind, or, I don't think we're going to be able to catch up, or I don't think we're going to be able to retire, or, these different comments that they'll make. And then we'll go through this meeting and I'll be like, you're in fantastic shape, and here's why. And then I'll show them exactly why they're in such good shape. So it's really common for people to experience a disconnect one way or the other. We do have the people who are overconfident. They're actually not in very good shape, but they feel like they are because maybe they're in better shape than their friend or their family or someone else that they know. And then we have the people who are actually in phenomenal shape. They don't feel like it. They always feel like they have to do more. And in many cases, we can help those people kind of take a step back. So, the value of a financial advisor is really in their perspective. It is the ability for us to objectively analyze where they are, how that relates to how they feel, and then align everything kind of so they can take actions that feel more confident to them than what they've been doing in the past.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Is there any last things you want to leave with us?
Yeah, I tell people all the time that when I see studies, whether it's, health, whether it's financial stuff, whatever it happens to be, I am almost always at least partly critical of those types of studies because, people are paid to do research in academic settings. And a lot of times, they have to do that research regardless of what the findings are, but they might have a preconceived notion to it. So they'll manufacture the findings in order to produce a report or a white paper, or maybe they're doing it for a master's thesis or a PhD type of thing. And so I'm always at least somewhat questioning about those types of results, and does it actually apply in some sort of practical sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And until next time, have a good one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.